All right, welcome to Hoops Tonight here at The Volume. Happy Tuesday, everybody. Hope all of you guys are having a great week. Well, the Minnesota Timberwolves, they're back against the wall, get a huge win on the road in Dallas to extend the series. Now we're headed to Game 5 on Thursday night back in Minnesota. I'm excited to break Game 4 down from the perspective of both teams. You guys know the drill. Before we get started, subscribe to the Hoops Tonight YouTube channel so you don't miss any more of our videos. Follow me on Twitter at _JasonLT so you guys don't miss show announcements. Don't forget about our podcast feed wherever you get your podcasts under Hoops Tonight, and keep dropping mailbag questions in those YouTube comments so we keep hitting them throughout the rest of the postseason. All right, let's talk some basketball. So obviously there's an important kind of subtext, a little bit of footnote on tonight's game, right? Like Derek Lively, who is a very important piece of this Dallas Mavericks team, missed the game. You could argue he's probably their fourth best player, I think, behind PJ Washington and Kyrie Irving and Luka Doncic. And I want to be clear, that certainly plays a role in what happened tonight. But I want to give Minnesota credit because I thought even if Lively had played tonight, it might not have made that much of a difference because I thought Minnesota outplayed Dallas in this particular game. And even though Lively is super important and he's going to return to this series, and Minnesota will have to beat the Mavs with Lively on the floor in all likelihood to advance to the NBA Finals, Minnesota just played a really good basketball game today. And I think just overly focusing on the Lively piece is missing the boat, and it's a disservice to a really good game that they played. I thought they just outplayed Dallas. They came out, they punched them in the mouth early. They responded to every Mavericks run, and they flipped a couple of key factors that they had been losing earlier in the series. First of all, they finally won the half-court battle. For the first time in the series, they outscored Dallas 98-86 in half-court points per 100 plays. A big part of that was the over-the-top shot making. Anthony Edwards made 7 jump shots. Kyrie Irving and Luka combined to make 6 jump shots between the two of them. Cat made 4 of his own. So you got outshot in terms of your over-the-top shooting from your stars. 11 made field goals to 6. And again, that's not on Lively. That's just those guys missing shots. It's a credit to the defense. It's a credit to Ant and Karl-Anthony Towns making shots. Overall jump shooting for both teams, 1.19 points per jump shot for Minnesota, 1.02 for the Dallas Mavericks. In the clutch situation that we've had in every single game in this series, for the first time in this series, Ant actually out-executed Luka in the clutch. Ant hit 2 jumpers, and he had 3 separate assists to Karl-Anthony Towns, and Luka hit that 3. He had that 1-3 in garbage time, and he drew that foul on the pump fake against Karl-Anthony Towns. But other than that, an assist to PJ Washington, he wasn't generating baskets the same way that Anthony Edwards was. That was the first time in the series through 4 games that I thought Ant actually outplayed Luka in this game. So credit to him. Again, they won the rebounding battle. Minnesota dominated points in the paint. And so I want to just give Minnesota credit. Obviously, there's a bunch of factors. You've got a classic closeout type of game, right? Kyrie straight up said it in his shoot around before the game. He's like, tonight's their Super Bowl. For us, it's just another basketball game, which, by the way, that's not necessarily the attitude you want to project before the game, but that said, that's the truth. Minnesota's desperate. Dallas has 4 chances to get this one game, right? Obviously, the Derek Lively injury. Karl-Anthony Towns and Anthony Edwards, they are both coming off of a really rough first 3 games of the series. So those 2 guys, they got their pride on the line in a lot of different ways, and they just bounced back tonight. And so again, I want to give Minnesota credit. I thought they just outplayed Dallas, and I thought they deserved to win. There was a key adjustment that we saw in this game that I thought was fascinating. Minnesota decides to put Jaden McDaniels on Kyrie Irving and move Anthony Edwards over onto Luka Doncic. I like this for a couple of different reasons, right? In the big picture, you don't love the idea of Ant on Luka because Ant's defensive effort has been somewhat inconsistent in this postseason run, even on the ball, right? And early in this series, a lot of Kyrie getting off was Ant just not doing a very good job. But the desperation of the situation actually brought Ant's best defensive game of the series out on Luka. One of the nice things with Ant, he has a little bit more strength and a little bit more quickness in short bursts of movement to be able to recover against Luka when he's working in ball screens. And then the major piece is Jaden McDaniels is an entirely different level of perimeter defender than Anthony Edwards in terms of total commitment for 48 minutes and a lot of length on Kyrie Irving. In a weird way, I look at it like this. Even moving forward to Game 5, I like this matchup because Do I expect Ant to have the same level of impact on Luka in Game 5 that he did in Game 4? No. I think Luka will have a big bounce back game in Game 5. That said, Jaden McDaniels on Kyrie Irving is really a tough matchup. That's a matchup that Kyrie might struggle with continuing forward in the series. We will see. I thought that, I look at it from the perspective of, if you can't cut off, the head of the snake, if you can somehow cut off the second most important piece of the team, right? If you can somehow minimize Kyrie, realizing that Jaden can't guard Luka anyway, so even a bad defensive effort from Ant isn't going to have that much of a different impact on Luka than Jaden McDaniels trying his ass off, right? Because Luka just throws Jaden around like a rag doll, right? So I kind of liked that idea from the standpoint of put your defensive specialist on a guy he can actually make struggle a little bit, and then put Ant in a situation where if he struggles, it's the same struggles that you were having with your primary perimeter defender anyway. I liked that adjustment. I think they should continue that forward into Game 5. We're this close to crowning a new NBA champ, and with the action heating up on the court, it's even hotter at DraftKings Sportsbook, an official sports betting partner of the NBA. There's only so many games left, and DraftKings Sportsbook has you covered with same-game parlays, live betting, odds boosts, and so much more. Don't miss out, or you'll have to wait until next NBA season to place your bets. It's super easy for first-timers to get started. Try betting on something simple, like picking a team to win. Go to the DraftKings Sportsbook app, select your squad, and place your first bet. It's that simple. The championship odds right now, as we head into the conference finals, according to DraftKings, Boston's at -150, the Timberwolves at +275, the Mavericks at +500, and the Indiana Pacers, a long shot, at +2,500. New to DraftKings, listen up. New customers can get a no-sweat bet up to $1,500. Just deposit at least $5, and you'll get a bonus bet back equal to your first bet if it doesn't hit. Download the DraftKings Sportsbook app now and use code HOOPS. That's HOOPS. That's code HOOPS for new customers to get a no-sweat bet up to $1,500 if your first bet doesn't hit. Only on DraftKings. The crown is yours. The big bounce back game from Karl-Anthony Towns took more of an inside-out approach, was really attacking the basket early, just kind of putting his head down, getting to the rim, hit that little bank shot driving towards his left-hand side against PJ Washington early in the game. That kind of set the tone a little bit. He didn't even attempt a three-point shot until the second half and then got red hot. Really impressively, too, considering he was in foul trouble most of the night. Classic Karl-Anthony Towns doing stupid shit to get into foul trouble, but he persisted through that and hit a bunch of big shots. Anthony Edwards, another big bounce back game from him. Again, I thought he was really good on defense against Luka Doncic for the most part. And then the big thing from him in this game was hitting all of those pull-up jump shots that he was hitting in pick and roll. Again, you guys, everyone's talking about, Derek Lively is out of the game. There's no rim protection. That's not true. You just scaled up Daniel Gafford's minutes. He played 31 minutes. Maxi Kleber played 13 minutes in this game, and he was +2. So you got Kleber back and you scaled up Gafford's minutes. There was still quite a bit of elite defensive personnel on the back line. Do you guys remember that play where Ant beat Derrick Jones Jr. off the dribble and elevated right into Gafford's chest, and Gafford walled him up, and he just kind of tried to wiggle around and he couldn't finish? There's still elite rim protection there. Daniel Gafford blocked Karl-Anthony Towns twice in that second half stretch, right? So they still have rim protection in there. And the reality is even regardless of whether Lively comes back in Game 5 or if he comes back in Game 6 or he doesn't come back at all, there's just a lot of rim protection in there. And so what's happening is as Luka's getting past the first layer of the defense, there's an opportunity for him to have some success in that mid-range. And specifically because of the Gobert problem and the fact that he can't catch or finish anything around the basket unless it's a wide open dunk, because of that, you need to be able to make those little mid-range jump shots. And pretty consistently in this game, Ant was able to get to those spots and knock them down. Again, he made 7 jump shots between pull-up threes and pull-up twos in this game. I thought that was, kind of the missing piece for him with this particular roster. Now, ideally in the big picture, we'll get to that in the offseason. I don't love the idea of Anthony Edwards needing to make pull-up jump shots in order to have success because he's got a stone hand center that can't catch and finish anything around the basket. But with this particular roster, that's just what he's going to have to do. And so, again, Karl-Anthony Towns and Anthony Edwards, we'll see. I don't think it's going to be enough. We're going to talk about it in a minute. I still feel very confident that Dallas is going to win this series. But like, again, this was a big bounce back game. And persistently throughout this playoff run, I talked about this in our mailbag this morning, I've been pretty consistently impressed with Anthony Edwards and how he's managed to kind of confront his weaknesses over the course of this playoff run and have some success in spite of those weaknesses. Typically, we see players have to have multiple playoff runs where they struggle or multiple off seasons to work on specific things. And Ant keeps like running into that brick wall, but then like just continuing trying to force his way through and having some success. And again, I don't think it'll be enough to turn the series around, but I was really impressed by the bounce back performance from Ant and from Karl-Anthony Towns tonight. One other guy I wanted to shout out for the Wolves, Kyle Anderson. The more defense on Luka. He's another guy that kind of he's like a bigger, stronger version of Jaden McDaniels in the sense that like he actually can absorb some of those blows from Luka and actually has the length to bother him on his pull-up jump shot a little bit. Now, he has some issues on the offensive end of the floor, as we have talked about ad nauseum over the course of the season, but he was actually really active off the ball in tonight's game, which allowed him to remain a net positive on the offensive end. Really good screening. He freed up Karl-Anthony Towns a few times for threes with smart screening. He had 3 offensive rebounds, was obviously super impactful on the defensive end of the floor. He had 3 steals in this game, bunch of really good contests on Luka Doncic. Really nice game from Kyle Anderson. Big bounce back win for the Minnesota Timberwolves. So looking forward to game 5. You know, I was talking with our production staff because we obviously were, I thought Dallas was going to get it done tonight. So shout out to Minnesota for getting it done, or for extending the series. But like we were just kind of joking. We're like, oh, we were expecting to have Thursday night off and have this like magical 8 days off before the NBA Finals, which obviously for myself and for the team here at Hoops Tonight would have been very nice because we've been going like absolutely insane for the last 2 months, right? But like, you know, Paul, our lead producer, he's like, oh yeah, I think Minnesota might kill him in Game 5, and you know, I kind of feel the opposite about that. Like, I think Game 5 is going to be another crazy close game that kind of ends up around 100 to 100 with a few minutes left, and I think it's going to come down to shot making. Because here's the thing, I keep talking about, you know, you remember that the bit that I did before this earlier in the series where I was like, momentum is only as good as whatever your matchup advantages are in the next series. That's kind of the way I look at the idea of Dallas's rim protection. It's like the cliche, like momentum is only as good as the next game starting pitcher in baseball. Like, doesn't matter how good you feel, how stoked you are, whether or not you're at home or on the road. If that dude's, you know, a 2-seamer and slider is flummoxing all your hitters and nobody can get on base. Like, it just doesn't matter if nobody can actually hit the pitches that are being thrown. And that's kind of the way I look at Game 5. Like, the problem's still there. It's still there that every single time Anthony Edwards comes off a ball screen, the paint is completely packed. Every single time Ant just drives by his man in ISO, because Gobert can't catch or finish anything, it's just Gafford or Lively just standing right under the basket waiting for him there. That problem's not going away. And again, I talked about it earlier. I do think Jaden McDaniels could have some continued success against Kyrie, but I do think that Luka will have a big bounce back offensive game in Game 5 on the road in Minnesota. So I expect Game 5 to be very close. And the bottom line is, in order for Minnesota to win this series, they have to win on Thursday in Minnesota, then go back on the road to Dallas on Saturday, and they have to win again. And then they have to come home and close them out in Game 7 at home on Monday, when they've already lost 2 games at home to Dallas. And every single one of these games has more or less been the same kind of pathway. I actually thought Minnesota outplayed Dallas tonight, but in the other games, they still managed, through attacking the offensive glass, through just making a lot of jump shots, Minnesota managed to kind of hang close, but the same problem persists. In these late game environments, Ant is going to have to make pull-up jump shots. Karl-Anthony Towns is going to have to make contested threes. Whereas on the other end of the floor, you have professional over-the-top shot makers in Kyrie Irving and Luka Doncic, and Luka just seems to be able to manipulate the defense to get wide open threes for guys like PJ Washington in the corner and easy lob dunks for guys like Daniel Gafford and Derek Lively. It just seems in the aggregate easier for Dallas to generate quality shots in the half court than Minnesota. And so, again, it's out there. If they go home in game 5 and it's a close game and Ant makes 2 or 3 more huge clutch pull-up jump shots, then and Luka happens to miss a couple, then yeah, they have a chance to win that game. But do I see that happening in game 5? And then again in game 6 on the road. And then, by the way, game 6, you're going to feel a bit of desperation because, like Kyrie said, just another basketball game in game 4. If Dallas loses game 5 in Minnesota, you bet your ass Dallas is going to come out ready to play incredibly desperate basketball in game 6 at home. And so, shout out to Minnesota, big bounce back game. But I still feel very confident that Dallas is going to get this done. I think they have at least a coin flip chance to get it done on Thursday. And I would just be very, very surprised if Minnesota was able to go on the road on Saturday night and win in Dallas. And so sticking with Dallas is my prediction. But I just want to tip the cap to Minnesota. It was a big back against the wall, gutsy performance from them to extend the series. All right, guys, that is all I have for tonight. I'm going to be back tomorrow morning. We're going to do a film session. We'll dig a little bit further into basically my goal for tomorrow morning is to rewatch the game and try to identify anything that is sustainable for Minnesota going on the road. Because if you're going to win this series, if you're going to win three additional games in a row, you better have flipped the script on some key advantages for your team that you can replicate on a night in, night out basis. And so I'm going to be digging in the film to try to find something like that. So keep an eye on the feeds. Tomorrow we'll have a film session, and then we'll get back into it on Thursday night for Game 5. I will see you guys then.